Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to my channel. Really stoked you stopped by. Today I want to tell you a story about cheating and the fallout that comes with it. So what does a guy do when everything he believed in comes crashing down? When the wife he loved for 23 years turns out to be a total stranger? When his best buddy stabs him in the back? Daniel Carter is a surgeon with a rock-solid reputation. Dude's used to holding a scalpel with steady hands and being in control of every little thing. But one random text notification on a phone screen flipped his whole world upside down. In just 11 minutes, he read through 17 months of straight-up lies. This story ain't about love. It ain't about hate either. It's about the choices we make when pain is messing with our heads. It's about what revenge really costs you, and whether you can put yourself back together after you've wrecked your own life. 17 months, 512 days of lies, and Daniel Carter discovered all of it because his wife left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered. The screen lit up at 7:43 on a Tuesday evening in March. Daniel was slicing tomatoes for a salad. The knife stopped mid-cut when he saw the preview. The message was from Michael T., and it read, "I can still taste you." Daniel set down the knife. He wiped his hands on the dish towel, slowly, the way he prepared before surgery. His wife's phone had no passcode. Emily always said she had nothing to hide. The shower was still running upstairs. Steam would be fogging the glass doors of their master bathroom, the bathroom they'd renovated 2 years ago, the one with the rainfall showerhead Emily had insisted on. Daniel picked up the phone and opened the messages. The thread went back 17 months. He scrolled to the beginning, to the first tentative exchange. "Hey, just wanted to say it was great seeing you at the fundraiser. You looked amazing." Emily's response, "You're too kind. How's Karen?" And Michael, "Karen's fine, but I haven't stopped thinking about that dress you wore." Daniel read everything, every escalation, every explicit photograph, every time Michael wrote that he loved her, and every time Emily wrote it back. He read about hotel rooms booked under Michael's brother's name. He read about afternoons at a rental property Michael owned in Ybor City, a property Daniel had helped him purchase 3 years ago as an investment. 11 minutes. That's how long Daniel stood in his kitchen reading the complete history of his wife's affair with his best friend. His hands didn't shake. His breathing stayed even. 23 years of surgical training had taught him to separate emotion from action. The shower stopped. Daniel placed the phone back on the counter. He adjusted its angle to match the position it had been in before, using the smudge marks on the granite as a guide. Then he returned to his tomatoes. Emily came downstairs 12 minutes later, her dark hair still damp, wearing the Yale sweatshirt Daniel had given her when they were dating. She kissed his cheek. "You're cooking," she said. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," Daniel said. "Just felt like salmon." She smiled and reached for her phone, checking it casually while Daniel plated their dinner. He watched her read Michael's message, watched the slight flush creep up her neck, watched her type a response with her back half turned to him. "Tomorrow. Same place. Can't wait." "How was your day?" Daniel asked. Emily locked her phone and slipped it into her sweatshirt pocket. "Boring," she said. "Just paperwork at the gallery. You know how Tuesdays are." Daniel nodded. He served her the salmon. He poured her favorite wine, a Sancerre they'd discovered on their trip to France 4 years ago. He asked about her upcoming exhibition. He listened to her lie about a client meeting that had run long. Emily complimented the fish. She said he was the best cook she knew. She talked about her plans for their anniversary next month, their 10th, and suggested they renew their vows. Wouldn't that be romantic? Her eyes were bright and sincere. Daniel agreed that it would be romantic. He cleared their plates. He washed the dishes by hand because he found it meditative. Emily went to the living room to watch television, and Daniel scrubbed the salmon pan until it gleamed. That night, He lay in bed beside his wife and stared at the ceiling. Emily slept soundly, the way she always did. In 23 years of surgery, Daniel had learned that the most critical decisions were never made in the operating room. They were made in the quiet hours before, when the patient's file was open and every variable was being calculated. He wasn't angry. That surprised him. The anger would come later, he assumed, but right now he felt something colder, something more useful. By 2 in the morning, Daniel had a framework, not a plan yet, just a structure. He understood, lying there in the dark, that divorce wasn't enough. A judge would divide their assets. Emily would get half of everything. Michael would survive the scandal, maybe even thrive in it. He'd always been charming, always landed on his feet. No. Daniel wanted more than a legal separation. He wanted to dismantle them, both of them. He wanted to take apart their lives the way he took apart a failing heart, precisely, methodically, with full knowledge of exactly which incision would cause the most damage. He closed his eyes at 3:15. He slept for 4 hours. He dreamed of nothing. The first rule of surgery: never operate without complete imaging. You need to see the problem from every angle before you make your first cut. Daniel spent the next 21 days building his picture. He became a student of his own marriage. He tracked Emily's patterns without alerting her to his surveillance. She met Michael on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the days Daniel had his longest surgeries. She told him she was visiting artists' studios, meeting with potential buyers, doing appraisals in Sarasota. The lies came easily to her. She'd been practicing them for almost 2 years. Daniel checked their phone records through their shared family account. Emily's calls to Michael averaged 47 minutes. She called him more often than she called her own mother. He examined their credit card statements and found nothing incriminating. Emily was careful, or Michael was paying. He drove by the Ybor City property on a Saturday afternoon and noted the window unit air conditioner running in the second-floor unit, even though the building was supposedly unoccupied. He researched Michael, his best friend since their first year at Johns Hopkins, his best man at their wedding, his business partner in a chain of 4 urgent care clinics across the Tampa Bay area. Michael had been at their anniversary dinners, their Christmas parties, their Sunday barbecues. He'd held Daniel's hand when Daniel's father had a stroke. He'd loaned Daniel $60,000 when Daniel was buying out a senior partner, and Daniel had repaid every cent. Michael was married to Karen, a pediatric oncologist at All Children's. They had 2 children, twins, 14 years old. Michael coached their soccer team on weekends. He donated to the Boys and Girls Club. He was, by every external measure, a good man. Daniel cataloged this information without judgment. He would need it later. On the 19th day, Daniel drove to Orlando. The law firm was in a glass tower downtown, far enough from Tampa that he wouldn't encounter anyone he knew. The attorney's name was Rebecca Thornton. She specialized in high-asset divorces. Daniel explained his situation in clinical terms. He described the affair. He outlined the assets: the house in South Tampa, valued at $2.1 million, the urgent care clinics, his 40% stake worth approximately $3.4 million, his retirement accounts, his investment portfolio, the vacation property in Asheville they'd bought as a rental. Rebecca listened and took notes. Then she asked about a prenuptial agreement. Daniel almost smiled. They had one. Emily's idea, actually. Her father had insisted on it before the wedding. Emily came from money, old Tampa money, the kind that arrived 3 generations back and multiplied quietly ever since. The prenup had seemed like a formality. Emily had laughed while signing it, joking about how they'd never need it. The document contained an infidelity clause. Standard language, Rebecca explained, but enforceable in Florida. If either party was proven to have engaged in an extramarital affair, that party forfeited their claim to marital assets. Daniel had proof. 17 months of messages, photographs, explicit documentation. Emily would get nothing. Rebecca asked if he wanted to proceed with filing. Daniel said not yet. He needed time. Time for what? Rebecca asked. Daniel said he was still thinking. He drove back to Tampa through afternoon traffic on I-4, past the billboards and the chain restaurants and the developments spreading into former orange groves. He thought about Michael's face at their last poker night, the way Michael had clapped him on the shoulder and called him brother. He thought about Emily wrapping her arms around his neck last week, telling him she was so lucky to have him. Divorce would hurt them, but it wouldn't destroy them. Michael would survive the scandal. People always forgave handsome men. Emily would retreat to her family money, nurse her wounds, eventually remarry. They would recover. They would move on. Daniel didn't want them to move on. He exited at Dale Mabry and drove through his neighborhood of old oaks and Spanish moss. His house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, a Mediterranean revival with a red tile roof that Emily had fallen in love with the moment she saw it. They'd built a life here, hosted dinner parties, planted a garden. He parked in the garage and sat in his car for 8 minutes. He was mapping the surgery in his mind, the incisions he would make, the order of operations, the point of no return. When he went inside, Emily was on the phone, laughing at something. She covered the receiver and told him she was talking to her mother. But Daniel could see Michael's name on the screen. He kissed her forehead and went upstairs to shower. The house in Clearwater sat on a canal that fed into Tampa Bay. A 42-foot sailboat was moored to the dock, its rigging clicking in the evening breeze. Daniel parked behind a security consulting van with tinted windows and walked up the path through the sea grape hedges. His brother Jason answered before Daniel knocked. He'd seen him on the cameras. Jason was 4 years younger but looked older. Prison had put lines around his eyes, gray in his temples. He'd served 4 years at Coleman Federal Facility for wire fraud, a real estate scheme that had cost investors $11 million. The judge had called him one of the most sophisticated con artists she'd ever sentenced. Jason had thanked her for the compliment. Now he was legitimate. Security consulting, fraud prevention. He taught corporations how to protect themselves from people like his former self. The irony wasn't lost on either brother. They sat on the back porch with bourbon. The sunset turned the water orange and pink. Pelicans dove for fish in the shallows. Jason waited. He knew Daniel hadn't driven 40 minutes for small talk. Daniel told him everything. The messages, the affair, Michael, Emily. 17 months of betrayal from the two people he'd trusted most in the world. Jason listened without interrupting. When Daniel finished, Jason drank his bourbon and stared at the water. "You want advice?" Jason asked. Daniel shook his head. "I want information. There's a difference?" "I want to know how to hurt them," Daniel said. "Not physically, financially, socially. I want to know how to take everything from them." Jason laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're a surgeon," he said. "You save lives. You don't destroy them." "I'm learning." Jason refilled both glasses. He talked for a while about consequences, about how revenge consumes the avenger, about how he'd spent 4 years in a cell because he thought he was smarter than everyone else, about how the satisfaction of winning never lasted as long as the wreckage. Daniel listened politely. Then he asked his questions again. Jason sighed. He looked out at his boat, at the life he'd built after prison, at the second chance he'd given himself. Then he started talking. Creating a shell company was straightforward. You needed a registered agent in a state with minimal disclosure requirements: Delaware, Nevada, Wyoming. The company would exist on paper: articles of incorporation, an EIN number, a business address that was actually a mail forwarding service. Add a professional website, some stock photography, a phone line that routed to a burner, and you had something that looked real. Documents were harder, but not impossible. Jason knew people who knew people. Forgers who could create investment prospectuses, property deeds, architectural renderings. The key was layering, multiple fake companies referencing each other, creating a web of apparent legitimacy that would take months to unravel. "What kind of money are we talking?" Jason asked. Daniel told him. Michael had liquid savings of around 600,000. He was always bragging about it at poker nights. Jason whistled. "That's federal territory. Over 100 grand, the FBI gets involved." Daniel nodded. He'd considered this. "You'd need to disappear the money somewhere it can't be traced," Jason said. "Offshore. The Caymans, maybe, or Belize. I know a guy in Nassau who used to move funds for some very unpleasant people. He's retired now, but he still consults." Daniel asked for the name. Jason hesitated. He made Daniel promise this conversation had never happened. Then he gave him a number. They sat in silence for a while. The sun dropped below the horizon. The first stars appeared. Somewhere across the water, a boat motor coughed to life. "There's something else," Jason said. "Something you're not telling me." Daniel didn't respond. Jason turned to look at his brother. "You're not just going after Michael. You're going after Emily, too." Daniel took a long drink of bourbon. "She doesn't have money of her own," Jason said. "Not separate from you. So you're planning something else. Something public." Daniel set down his glass. He told Jason about the anniversary party, about the video he planned to compile, about showing Emily's infidelity to everyone she knew, everyone she loved, in a single devastating moment. Jason was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "You know this won't make you feel better." Daniel stood. He thanked his brother for the bourbon. Jason walked him to his car. At the door, he grabbed Daniel's arm. "I've been where you are," he said. "That cold place where everything makes sense and nothing matters. It's not clarity, it's damage." Daniel pulled free. "I'll call you," he said. He drove home in the dark, the number of a money launderer in Nassau saved in a phone he'd bought at a gas station 2 weeks ago. The lunch meeting happened on a Wednesday at Burns Steakhouse, the old Tampa institution with its mahogany walls and extensive wine list. Daniel had reserved a private booth in the back. Michael arrived 12 minutes late, full of apologies about traffic on Kennedy. They ordered steaks. They talked about the clinics. Patient volume was up, but so were insurance hassles. They complained about hospital politics, about the new chief medical officer who didn't understand how surgery actually worked. Normal conversation, brother to brother. Daniel waited until dessert to mention the investment. "I've been looking at a development opportunity," he said. "Something different. Real estate." Michael perked up. He always did when money was involved. Daniel laid out the pitch. A luxury condominium project in Naples, waterfront, pre-construction pricing for early investors. The developer was a company called Coastal Meridian LLC, newer firm, but their principals had built 3 successful projects in South Florida over the past decade. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were prospectuses, architectural renderings, financial projections. The glossy pages showed a gleaming tower overlooking the Gulf of Mexico. Units starting at 900,000, with projected returns of 40% within 3 years. Michael flipped through the documents. His eyes moved quickly, absorbing numbers. "Where'd you hear about this?" "A patient," Daniel said. "His son-in-law is one of the developers. They're only offering this to a small group of accredited investors. 20 spots." Michael nodded slowly. He was calculating. Daniel could see it. "What's the minimum buy-in?" Michael asked. 300,000, Daniel said. "But I'm putting in 500. The returns scale with investment." Michael looked up. "You're sure about this?" Daniel held his gaze. "I'm putting in 500,000 of my own money," he said. "Does that answer your question?" Michael laughed. His old competitive instinct was surfacing. Daniel had always made more money, had always been slightly more successful. Michael couldn't resist the chance to match him. "I could do 600, Michael said. "Maybe 650. Daniel shook his head. "Don't overextend yourself. Start with 5 like me." Michael's jaw tightened. The challenge had been issued. "No," he said. "I want in for 620,000. That's what I have liquid." Daniel pretended to consider this. He warned Michael about risk. He suggested talking to a financial advisor. He did everything a good friend would do. Michael waved off the concerns. He trusted Daniel. They'd been partners for 15 years. If Daniel was in, Michael was in. They shook hands across the table. Michael ordered a celebratory scotch. He talked about what he'd do with his returns, maybe a boat or an upgrade on his vacation home in the Keys. He was practically glowing. Daniel smiled and raised his glass. The next week was administrative. Michael wired his $620,000 to an account number Daniel provided. The account belonged to Coastal Meridian LLC, which existed as a registered business in Delaware with a mailing address in Wilmington. The money sat in that account for exactly 4 hours before it was transferred to a secondary account in the Cayman Islands, and from there to a numbered account in Belize. Daniel's own $500,000 took the same journey. But Daniel's money would find its way back to him eventually, routed through 3 more shell companies over the course of 6 months. Michael's money would not. The website for Coastal Meridian continued to function. Emails sent to the company received prompt replies from a woman named Patricia who claimed to be the investor relations coordinator. She sent updates on construction timelines, permitting progress, pre-sale numbers. She was very professional. Patricia didn't exist. The emails were written by a freelancer in the Philippines who thought she was working for a legitimate marketing company. She had no idea she was maintaining a facade. Michael called Daniel twice during this period to express his excitement. He'd told Karen about the investment, and she was thrilled. They were already discussing how to spend the profits. Daniel listened patiently. He said all the right things. On his calendar, he marked a date 3 weeks out. That was when the website would go dark, when the emails would stop, when the phone number for Coastal Meridian would become disconnected. That was when Michael would discover that everything he owned had vanished. The call came on a Tuesday morning, just before Daniel's 8 o'clock surgery. Michael's voice was unrecognizable, stretched thin, vibrating at a frequency Daniel had never heard from him. "The website's down," Michael said. "I can't reach Patricia. The phone number's disconnected." Daniel was in the pre-op locker room, already in scrubs. He sat down on the bench and let Michael talk. The details tumbled out. Michael had tried to log into the investor portal that morning and found nothing. A blank page, an error message. He'd called the number he had for Coastal Meridian and gotten a recording that the number was no longer in service. He'd driven to the Naples address listed on the documents and found a strip mall with a vacant storefront where the office should have been. Daniel listened. He made sounds of shock and concern. His performance was flawless. "This can't be happening," Michael said. "That was everything. That was my retirement. Karen doesn't know how much I put in. Oh God. Oh God." Daniel told him to calm down. He said they needed to think clearly, to approach this methodically. He offered to make some calls, to reach out to his patient who had connected him to the developers. "You think it's a scam?" Michael asked. His voice cracked. "I don't know yet," Daniel said. "Let me find out. Don't do anything rash. Don't call the police until we know what we're dealing with." Michael agreed. He was desperate for someone to take charge, to tell him what to do. Daniel had always been the leader between them, the decision-maker. Michael followed. Daniel went into his surgery. A mitral valve repair on a 67-year-old woman with congenital heart disease. He worked for 4 hours with absolute focus. When he was operating, nothing else existed. After the surgery, he sat in his office and made phone calls. He called the number for Coastal Meridian himself and heard the disconnection message. He sent emails that bounced back as undeliverable. He searched online and found that the company's website had been taken down. Its domain registration expired. Then he called Michael back. "It's gone," Daniel said. "All of it. The company, the project, everything. We've been defrauded." Michael wept. Daniel had never heard him cry before, not even when Michael's father died. The sound was raw and ugly. Daniel let him cry. Then he said, "I'm going to handle this. I have contacts. Let me work through back channels before we involve law enforcement. There might be a way to trace the money." This was a lie. There was no way to trace the money. But Michael didn't know that. Michael believed that Daniel was his ally, his brother, his best friend, who was suffering the same loss. "I'll call you tomorrow," Daniel said. "Sit tight." He hung up and looked out his window at the Tampa skyline. Afternoon clouds were building over the bay. The humidity was rising. Storm season was coming. Phase 2 began that evening. Daniel had spent weeks preparing the next element. On a laptop he'd purchased with cash, using a VPN routed through 4 countries, he had created Instagram accounts. 3 of them. Each belonged to an attractive woman in her 30s. Each had a history going back 8 months, photographs, stories, comments on other accounts. The profiles looked real because Daniel had invested hundreds of hours making them look real. The first woman was named Veronica. Dark hair, green eyes, photographs taken from a private account belonging to a real estate agent in Phoenix. The second was named Ashley. Blonde, athletic, pictures sourced from a personal trainer in Dallas. The third was named Megan. Redhead, bookish, images from a graduate student in Boston. None of these women knew their photographs had been stolen. None of them would ever find out. Daniel had created message threads between each of these accounts and Michael's Instagram. The messages were explicit. They referenced dates, times, locations. They described encounters that had never happened. They built a narrative of a man who couldn't stop cheating. The evidence was fabricated, but it looked authentic. Daniel loaded the most damning threads onto a tablet he kept in his home office. Then he left the tablet in the living room, open to the messages, positioned where Emily would find it. It took her 2 days. Daniel was in the kitchen when he heard her gasp. He came into the living room to find Emily standing over the tablet, her face pale. "What is this?" she asked. Daniel looked at the screen. He saw the messages between Michael and Veronica. He let his expression shift from confusion to recognition, to hurt. "Those are messages to Michael," he said. "From some woman." Emily scrolled through them. Her hands were shaking. "There are more," Daniel said quietly. "2 other women. I found them this morning. I was going to tell you, but I didn't know how." Emily looked at him. Her eyes were wet. How could he do this to Karen? Daniel said nothing. He let her fill the silence. Emily kept scrolling. She read messages that didn't exist, evidence of an affair that had never happened. She read about betrayal and deception, and she believed every word. She tried to call Michael that afternoon. He didn't answer. He was too consumed with his financial ruin to check his phone. She tried again that evening. Still nothing. "He's avoiding me," Emily told Daniel. "He knows something's wrong." Daniel nodded sympathetically. Over the following days, Emily's attempts to reach Michael grew more desperate and then stopped entirely. She told Daniel she was disgusted. She said she'd never trusted Michael, not really. She said Karen deserved to know. Daniel agreed with everything she said. He was the supportive husband, the steady presence. Meanwhile, Michael was drowning. His savings were gone. His calls to Daniel went to voicemail. Daniel was always in surgery, always in meetings, always just missing him. Karen had started asking questions about their bank accounts. Michael's drinking increased. Daniel watched from a distance. He watched the man who had stolen his wife begin to crumble. The anniversary party was in 3 weeks. Michael's hands hadn't stopped trembling in 9 days. He stood in his bathroom at 2 in the morning, gripping the sink, staring at a face he barely recognized. The pouches under his eyes had darkened to purple. He'd lost 8 pounds. His skin had taken on a grayish tint that reminded him of patients in the final stages. Karen was asleep down the hall. She didn't know about the money yet. Michael had been covering, making excuses, buying time. But the credit card bills were coming due. The mortgage payment was approaching. The twins needed their tuition deposit for summer camp. He splashed water on his face and went downstairs. The bottle of Woodford Reserve was on the counter where he'd left it. He poured 3 fingers and drank it standing up. The burn helped. It was the only thing that helped. His phone showed 17 missed calls over the past week. Emily had tried him repeatedly, then stopped. Daniel was perpetually unavailable. His attorney hadn't returned his messages. The detective he'd hired to investigate Coastal Meridian had found nothing. The company had evaporated like morning fog. Michael poured another drink. He thought about the affair, about Emily, about the afternoons in the Ybor City apartment, the stolen hours, the way she laughed when he kissed her neck. He'd told himself it wasn't hurting anyone. Daniel was always working. Emily was lonely. These things happened. Now Emily wouldn't return his calls. He'd driven past the gallery twice, hoping to catch her, but she was never there. He'd texted her 31 times. Red receipts showed she'd seen every message. She simply chose not to respond. Something had changed. Michael could feel it, but he didn't know what. The next morning, he went to work. His urgent care clinic in Carrollwood was busy, flu season lingering, spring allergies arriving. He saw patients on autopilot. He prescribed medications. He ordered tests. A nurse asked if he was feeling okay, and he said he was fine. At lunch, he drove to Emily's gallery in Hyde Park. The door was locked, but he could see her through the window, talking to a client. He knocked. She looked up, saw him, and turned her back. Michael knocked again, harder. Emily walked to the door but didn't open it. Through the glass, she said, "Go away." Michael pressed his palm against the window. "Em, please, I need to talk to you." Her expression was ice. "I know about Veronica," she said, "and Ashley, and Megan. I know about all of them." Michael's stomach dropped. He didn't recognize the names. "What are you talking about?" Emily shook her head. Her eyes were red. "Don't lie to me," she said. "I saw the messages. Daniel showed me everything." Michael's mind raced. He didn't know anyone named Veronica, or Ashley, or Megan. He hadn't messaged anyone except Emily in years. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Em, I swear to God." Emily walked away from the door. She disappeared into the back of the gallery. Michael stood on the sidewalk for 11 minutes, waiting. She didn't return. He drove to Daniel's office at Tampa General. The receptionist said Dr. Carter was in surgery. Michael waited in the lobby for 3 hours. When Daniel finally emerged, still in scrubs, he looked exhausted. Michael grabbed his arm. "We need to talk." Daniel glanced around the crowded lobby. "Not here," he said. "Come to my office." They walked through sterile corridors, past nurses and orderlies, into Daniel's corner office with its view of the Hillsborough River. Daniel closed the door. Michael talked for 20 minutes straight. He explained Emily's accusation. He swore he didn't know anyone named Veronica or Ashley or Megan. He said he'd never cheated on anyone except... And here he stopped, realizing what he was about to admit. Daniel's face remained neutral. "Except what?" Michael looked at his feet. "Except Karen," he said quietly. "With Emily. But you know that's different." Daniel said nothing. Michael looked up. His eyes were desperate. "Someone's framing me," he said. "Someone created fake messages. I don't know who or why, but this isn't real. You have to believe me." Daniel nodded slowly. He said he'd look into it. He said he'd talk to Emily. He told Michael to go home and rest, to stop drinking, to get himself together. Michael thanked him. He hugged Daniel, holding on too long. Daniel patted his back stiffly. After Michael left, Daniel sat at his desk and smiled for the first time in weeks. The isolation was complete. Emily had abandoned Michael. Michael had no idea why. The trap was functioning exactly as designed. That evening, Michael went home and told Karen about the money. Her scream woke the twins. The Vinoy Renaissance Hotel rose pink and Mediterranean against the St. Petersburg waterfront. Built in 1925, it had hosted presidents, celebrities, and Tampa Bay's elite for nearly a century. Daniel had chosen it specifically for its grandeur. 143 guests were expected. The ballroom could hold twice that number, but Daniel wanted intimacy. He wanted everyone close enough to see clearly. The planning had taken 7 weeks. Daniel had handled most of it himself, which Emily found touching. He'd selected the menu, the flowers, the string quartet. He'd designed the seating chart to maximize impact. Emily's parents at the center table, directly facing the screen. Michael and Karen positioned near the exit, in case Michael tried to run. Emily didn't know Michael was invited. Daniel had told her he'd reconsidered, that after everything Michael had done, he couldn't stomach the man's presence. Emily had been relieved. She didn't want to see Michael either. The fabricated messages had destroyed whatever remained of her feelings for him. But the invitation had gone out anyway. Daniel had called Michael personally, framing it as an olive branch. "We've been friends too long," he'd said. "Whatever happened with the investment, whatever mistakes you've made, you're still family. Come to the party. Let's start over." Michael had wept with gratitude. The day arrived. March 14th, a Saturday. The weather cooperated. 74 degrees, clear skies, a gentle breeze off Tampa Bay. Daniel dressed in a charcoal suit that Emily had bought him for Christmas. She wore a deep blue gown that matched her eyes. They looked, by all accounts, like a couple still in love. Guests arrived starting at 6. Daniel greeted each one personally. He shook hands with colleagues from the hospital. He embraced Emily's parents, who had flown in from Connecticut. He accepted congratulations and well wishes with practiced warmth. Michael and Karen arrived at 6:45. Karen looked uncomfortable. She'd learned about the investment disaster 3 weeks ago and still wasn't speaking to Michael except when necessary. Michael looked worse than uncomfortable. He looked like a man attending his own funeral. Daniel welcomed them at the door. "No hard feelings," he said, clasping Michael's hand. "Tonight's about celebration." Michael nodded weakly. Karen wouldn't meet Daniel's eyes. Emily spotted them from across the room. Her face tightened. Daniel took her hand and squeezed it. "Be gracious," he murmured. "For me." Emily forced a smile. The evening progressed. Appetizers circulated. Champagne flowed. The string quartet played Vivaldi. Daniel moved through the room like a conductor, positioning his instruments. He made sure the AV technician understood the timing. He confirmed the video file was loaded and ready. He checked the exits. At 8:15, he stepped onto the small stage at the front of the ballroom. The crowd quieted. Daniel thanked everyone for coming. He spoke about marriage, about commitment, about the decade he and Emily had shared. His voice was steady and warm. Emily watched from her seat at the head table, tears forming in her eyes. "I want to talk about trust," Daniel said, "about what it means to truly know another person." The room was silent. 143 people leaned forward. Daniel smiled. He looked at Emily. Then he looked at Michael. 10 years ago, I married the woman I thought I'd spend my life with," Daniel continued. "And for most of that time, I believed I understood who she was. But 6 weeks ago, I learned something that changed everything." Emily's smile faltered. She didn't understand. Daniel nodded to the technician. The screen behind him illuminated. The video began. The first clip was security footage from a hotel lobby. Emily and Michael entering together. Michael's hand on the small of her back, the timestamp in the corner, 14 months ago. Emily's mother gasped. The second clip was from a different hotel, Emily and Michael leaving an elevator, her lipstick smeared, his shirt untucked. 12 months ago. The third clip was from the Ybor City apartment. Daniel had hired a private investigator 8 weeks ago after he'd discovered the affair. The investigator had installed a camera across the street. The footage showed Emily entering the building. Michael following 3 minutes later, neither emerging for 2 hours. The room erupted. People shouted. Chairs scraped. Emily's father was on his feet, face crimson. Karen was screaming at Michael, throwing her champagne, the crystal flute shattering against his chest. Emily sat frozen. Her mouth was open. No sound came out. Daniel stood calmly at the microphone. He watched the chaos he'd created with the detachment of a surgeon observing a successful operation. The video ran for 47 seconds before someone cut the feed. 47 seconds was enough. Every guest had seen. Every guest understood. Daniel stepped off the stage and walked toward his wife. The aftermath lasted 11 minutes. Karen was still screaming when security arrived. 2 uniformed guards approached the head table, uncertain of what exactly they were supposed to do. A woman was crying. A man was bleeding from the champagne glass. A crowd of well-dressed guests had clustered near the exits like panicked animals. Emily hadn't moved from her chair. Her face had gone the color of old paper. She stared at Daniel as he approached, and her mouth formed words that produced no sound. Daniel sat down beside her. Around them, the room churned. Emily's father was pushing through the crowd toward Michael, shouting threats that would have seemed theatrical if his voice hadn't cracked with genuine rage. Emily's mother remained in her seat, hands pressed flat against the tablecloth, breathing in shallow gasps. A waiter had dropped a tray of champagne flutes, and the crash seemed to have happened in slow motion. Daniel said nothing. He simply watched Emily process what had happened. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "How did you know?" Daniel reached into his jacket pocket. He removed a phone, her old phone, the one she'd replaced 6 months ago and left in her desk drawer. She'd forgotten to wipe it. "You left it in your office at the gallery," Daniel said. "I found it when I was looking for a charger." Emily stared at the phone. The cracked screen, the faded case with the watercolor print. "I read everything," Daniel continued. "Every message, every photograph, every time you told him you loved him." Emily's hands began to shake. Daniel stood. He smoothed his jacket. Then he reached into his other pocket and withdrew an envelope. "These are divorce papers," he said. "I had my attorney prepare them 6 weeks ago. You'll notice there's a provision regarding the infidelity clause in our prenuptial agreement." Emily took the envelope. Her fingers left damp marks on the paper. "You get nothing," Daniel said. "The house, the investments, the retirement accounts, all of it stays with me. Our prenup was very clear." Emily looked up. Her mascara had begun to run, creating dark streaks down her cheeks. "Daniel, please." "Please what?" Daniel's voice didn't rise. It remained conversational, almost gentle. "Please forgive you? Please pretend I didn't see you telling my best friend that you wished you'd married him instead?" Emily flinched. "Please forget the hotel rooms," Daniel continued. "The apartment in Ybor? The 17 months you lied to me every single day?" Someone was approaching. Emily's mother, moving unsteadily across the ballroom. Daniel stepped back. "Your parents are coming," he said. "I imagine they have questions." Emily grabbed his arm. Her grip was desperate. "I loved you," she said. "I still love you." Michael was a mistake. He meant nothing. Daniel gently removed her hand. He held it for a moment, studying her fingers, the wedding ring he'd placed there 10 years ago. "You should have thought about that 17 months ago," he said. He placed her hand back in her lap. Emily's mother arrived at the table. Her face was a mask of controlled fury. She didn't look at her daughter. She looked at Daniel. "I'm so sorry," she said. Her voice trembled. "I had no idea." Daniel nodded. "Neither did I." He turned and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted for him. Nobody spoke as he passed. Michael was crumpled against a pillar near the door, Karen gone, his shirt stained purple with champagne and something darker, possibly blood from where the glass had struck him. Daniel stopped beside his former best friend. Michael looked up. His eyes were red, destroyed. The investment wasn't real, Daniel said quietly, so only Michael could hear. Coastal Meridian was fake. I created it. Your money is gone. Michael's expression didn't change. He was beyond shock. And those women Emily thinks you were messaging? Daniel continued. Veronica, Ashley, Megan. I made them up. I fabricated the evidence. Emily abandoned you because I wanted her to. Michael opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Daniel leaned closer. You took my wife, he said, so I took everything else. He straightened and walked out of the ballroom. He didn't look back. 72 hours. That's how long it took for Emily's world to completely collapse. Day 1. She stayed at her parents' hotel suite at the Vinoy, unable to face returning to the house. Her mother refused to be in the same room with her. Her father paced the hallway outside, making calls to attorneys. Emily sat on the bathroom floor and vomited until nothing remained. Day 2. News of the party spread through Tampa's social circles with viral efficiency. Emily's phone rang constantly, friends demanding explanations, acquaintances pretending sympathy while fishing for details. Her assistant at the gallery called to say that 2 artists had pulled their work. A collector canceled a pending commission. By evening, Emily had stopped answering. Day 3. She drove to the house on the cul-de-sac. Daniel's car was gone. She used her key, but the locks had been changed. A note was taped to the door. Her belongings had been packed into boxes and stored at a facility on Gandhi Boulevard. The access code was written at the bottom. Please don't contact me, the note concluded. Our attorneys will handle everything from here. Emily stood on the porch of the house where she'd lived for 8 years. The garden she'd planted was beginning to bloom, azaleas in pink and white, jasmine climbing the trellis. She'd chosen every paint color inside. She'd selected the tiles in the kitchen, the fixtures in the bathrooms, the carpet in the bedroom where she and Daniel had made love hundreds of times. None of it was hers anymore. Michael's collapse happened simultaneously, but followed a different trajectory. After the party, Karen drove home and began packing. She told the twins nothing, only that they were going to stay with their grandmother for a while. She removed her wedding ring in the driveway and left it on the front seat of Michael's car. Michael found it the next morning. He called Karen 63 times. She answered on the 64th. I spoke to a divorce attorney this morning, she said. You'll hear from him by the end of the week. Michael tried to explain. He talked about the real estate fraud, about Daniel's betrayal, about the fabricated evidence. Karen listened in silence. When he finished, she said, It doesn't matter if those other women were real or not. Emily was real. For 2 years. In our bed, Michael. You brought her to our bed. Michael had no response. The medical board inquiry began on day 4, not related to the affair, related to his practice. 3 patients had filed complaints during the weeks when Michael was distracted by his financial collapse. A missed diagnosis, a delayed referral, a prescription error that had resulted in a hospital visit. The board scheduled a hearing. Michael's malpractice insurance carrier sent a letter expressing concerns. His partners at the urgent care clinic requested an emergency meeting to discuss his future with the practice. By day 7, Michael had moved into a residential hotel near the airport. He was drinking a bottle of bourbon every 2 days. He'd lost 14 pounds. His hands shook so badly he could no longer perform procedures. On day 12, he was arrested for driving under the influence after being pulled over on Dale Mabry Highway at 2 in the afternoon. His blood alcohol level was 0.19. Daniel read about the arrest in the Tampa Bay Times. A small item, buried in the local section. He clipped it and placed it in a folder with the other documentation he'd been collecting. Emily called him on day 15. He let it go to voicemail. Her message was 9 minutes long. She apologized. She explained. She begged. She said she would sign whatever papers he wanted, that she didn't care about the money, that she only wanted a chance to talk. Daniel deleted the message without responding. He'd won. Completely. Totally. Absolutely. Emily was isolated and broken. Michael was unemployed, under investigation, facing criminal charges. Karen had filed for divorce and full custody. The twins weren't speaking to their father. Every piece of Daniel's plan had functioned exactly as designed. His revenge was complete. He returned to surgery. A triple bypass on a 40-year-old father of 4. The patient had ignored warning signs for years, and his heart had finally given out during a business trip to Atlanta. Daniel opened his chest and spent 6 hours repairing the damage. The surgery was successful. The patient would live. His children would have their father for another 30 years if he took care of himself. Daniel scrubbed out and went to his office. He sat at his desk and looked out at the city. The sun was setting over the bay. The sky turned orange and purple. He waited for satisfaction, for relief, for some sense of closure. Nothing came. 3 months passed. Daniel established a routine. He woke at 5:30, ran 4 miles along Bayshore Boulevard, showered, drove to the hospital. He performed surgeries, 2 or 3 per day, sometimes 4. He attended meetings. He mentored residents. He published a paper on minimally invasive valve replacement that was accepted by the Journal of Thoracic and Cardiovascular Surgery. His colleagues noticed a change. He was quieter than before, more focused. He no longer attended social gatherings or hospital fundraisers. He declined invitations to dinner. He left promptly after his last surgery each day and drove home to an empty house. The house felt different now, larger. Emily's absence had created spaces he hadn't known existed, empty shelves where her books had been, blank walls where her art had hung. He'd hired someone to remove her things, and they'd been thorough. Nothing remained of their shared life except his memories. He started cooking elaborate meals for himself: beef Wellington, coq au vin. Complicated recipes that required attention and time. He ate alone at the dining room table that could seat 12, his phone dark, the only sound the clink of his fork against the plate. News of Emily reached him occasionally. She'd moved to Sarasota, taken a job as an assistant at a gallery there, a significant demotion from running her own space. Her parents had cut off financial support after she refused to contest the divorce. She lived in a studio apartment now, above a dry cleaner's shop. Michael's trajectory was easier to track. The medical board had suspended his license pending a full review. His partners had bought him out of the urgent care clinics for a fraction of his stake's value. He'd checked into a rehabilitation facility in Ocala after his second drunk driving arrest. Karen's divorce was finalized in July. She'd received full custody of the twins. Michael had visitation rights, but the children refused to see him. Daniel absorbed these updates without satisfaction. He'd expected to feel vindicated. He felt empty instead. One evening in late August, he drove to Clearwater to see Jason. They sat on the back porch, same as before, watching the sun drop below the horizon. The bourbon was the same too. Woodford Reserve, neat. "You got what you wanted," Jason said. "Both of them destroyed." Daniel nodded. "And?" Daniel didn't answer. Jason turned to look at his brother. "The revenge thing," he said. "It's like surgery. You go in with a plan. You execute the plan. Everything works. And then the patient still dies." Daniel stared at the water. "What did you think would happen?" Jason asked. "That you'd feel whole again? That everything would go back to the way it was?" "I don't know what I thought," Daniel said. "Yes, you do," Jason said. "You thought if you hurt them enough, it would stop hurting you." Daniel drained his glass. "Did it work?" Jason asked. Daniel set the glass down. The answer was obvious. They sat in silence for a while. A boat motored past, its lights reflecting on the dark water. Somewhere in the distance, music was playing, a party at one of the waterfront mansions. Jason refilled both glasses. "You saved a man's life last week," he said. 40 years old, father of 4. "I read about it in the paper." "Triple bypass," Daniel said. "His kids still have a dad because of you. Jason said. "That matters more than any of this other stuff." Daniel looked at his brother. Jason had done 4 years in federal prison. He'd lost everything, his money, his reputation, his first marriage, and he'd rebuilt. Slowly, painfully, but completely. "How did you do it?" Daniel asked. "After Coleman. How did you start over?" Jason smiled, but there was sadness in it. "I stopped looking backward," he said. "That's all. I decided to look forward instead." Daniel nodded slowly. He drove home through the August night, windows down, warm air rushing past. The Tampa skyline glowed on the horizon. His house waited at the end of the cul-de-sac, dark and quiet. He parked in the garage and sat in his car for a long time. The revenge was complete. Michael was broken. Emily was exiled. Every objective had been achieved. And yet something was missing. Some piece of himself that he'd traded away without realizing the cost. He went inside and stood in his empty living room. The furniture was arranged exactly as it had always been. Nothing was out of place. Everything was perfect. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt anything at all. The conference was in Chicago. 4 days of lectures on emerging techniques in cardiothoracic surgery, held at the Hyatt Regency on Wacker Drive. Daniel had presented on the second day a paper about robotic-assisted mitral valve repair that had drawn a standing room crowd. Now it was evening, the final night, and he sat alone at the hotel bar nursing a glass of Macallan. The bar was busy. Surgeons from across the country clustered in groups, exchanging business cards, debating outcomes, complaining about insurance companies. Daniel recognized faces from journals, from operating rooms, from a career that had spanned 23 years. None of them approached him. His reputation had shifted since the anniversary party. People knew something had happened, though the details remained fuzzy. Tampa gossip traveled, but it traveled in whispers. She sat down 2 stools away. Dark hair, cut short, late 30s, maybe 40. She wore a gray blazer over a white blouse, and she ordered a gin and tonic without looking at the menu. Her badge said she was from Northwestern, cardiology, not surgery. Daniel noticed her noticing him. She smiled. "Long day?" "They all are," Daniel said. She laughed. It was a real laugh, not performed. Her name was Sarah. She'd been at his presentation that morning. She said his work on robotic techniques was impressive, that she'd referred 2 patients to Tampa General specifically because of his outcomes data. Daniel thanked her. They talked about medicine, about Chicago winters versus Florida humidity, about the tedium of conferences and the quality of hotel bourbon. She was easy to talk to, intelligent, direct. She didn't fill silences with nervous chatter. After an hour, she asked what had brought him to cardiac surgery. Daniel gave his standard answer, a grandfather with heart disease, an inspiring mentor during residency. The words came automatically. He'd told this story 100 times. Sarah tilted her head. "That sounds rehearsed," she said. Daniel paused. Nobody had ever called him on it before. She waited. "My father," Daniel said slowly. "He had a massive heart attack when I was 14. The surgeon who saved him was this tiny woman, barely 5 feet tall, with hands like a pianist. I watched her explain the procedure to my mother, and I thought, this person holds life and death in her hands. This person matters." Sarah nodded. "That's better," she said. They ordered another round. The bar began to empty as surgeons drifted toward their rooms, toward early flights home. Sarah stayed. She asked about Tampa, about his practice, about his life outside the hospital. Daniel hesitated. He could tell her the truth, the divorce, the revenge, the emptiness. Or he could construct a story, something palatable, something that wouldn't send her running. He chose neither. "I'm not sure I have a life outside the hospital right now," he said. Sarah studied him. Her eyes were green, flecked with gold near the pupils. "Divorce?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "Recent?" 6 months. She didn't offer sympathy. She didn't probe for details. She simply said, "That's hard." They sat in silence for a moment. The bartender wiped down the counter nearby, glancing at the clock. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said. Daniel nodded. "Your presentation this morning, you talked about precision, about controlling every variable, anticipating every complication. You said that's what separates good surgeons from great ones." Daniel remembered. He'd been proud of that line. "Do you approach everything that way?" Sarah asked. "Your whole life?" Daniel considered the question. He thought about the months of planning, the shell companies, the fabricated evidence, the anniversary party choreographed like a surgical procedure, every incision mapped in advance. "I used to think so," he said. "And now?" Sarah was watching him closely, not judging, just curious. Daniel looked down at his drink. The ice had melted. The whiskey was watered down. "Now I'm not sure it works," he said. "Controlling everything. I thought if I could control the outcome, I could control how I felt about it. But it doesn't work that way." Sarah nodded slowly. She didn't ask what he meant. She seemed to understand anyway. They talked for another hour, about nothing important, about everything important. When the bar finally closed at midnight, Sarah wrote her number on a cocktail napkin and slid it across the counter. "If you're ever in Chicago," she said. Daniel took the napkin. He looked at her number, her handwriting, small and precise, a doctor's script. "I should tell you something," he said. Sarah waited. "I'm not a good person," Daniel said. "Not anymore. Maybe not ever. I did something 6 months ago that I thought would fix things, and it didn't fix anything. It just made me into someone I don't recognize." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "We've all done things we regret. The question is what you do next." She stood, gathered her jacket, and walked toward the elevators. At the corner, she turned back. "The number's real," she said. "Use it or don't, but don't decide tonight." She disappeared around the corner. Daniel sat alone in the empty bar. The bartender was stacking chairs. The lights were dimming. Outside the windows, Chicago's skyline glittered against the November sky. He took out his phone and saw a missed call from Jason. His brother had been checking in regularly since August, never pushing, just present. Daniel hadn't told him about the emptiness, but Jason knew anyway. Jason always knew. Daniel called him back. "It's late," Jason said. "You okay?" "I met someone," Daniel said. "At the conference?" "At the bar. A cardiologist from Northwestern. She gave me her number." Jason was quiet for a beat. "And?" "And nothing," Daniel said. "I don't know why I'm telling you." "You're telling me because it matters," Jason said. "Because something shifted." Daniel didn't respond. "Here's what I know," Jason said. "You spent a year planning revenge. You executed it perfectly. And you've spent 6 months discovering that perfect doesn't mean good. Now you're sitting in a hotel bar in Chicago, thinking about calling a woman you just met. That's not nothing, Dan. That's a choice." "What kind of choice?" "The only kind that matters," Jason said. "Forward or backward?" Daniel looked at the napkin in his hand. Sarah's number, a possibility he hadn't planned for. "I don't know how to go forward," Daniel said. "Nobody does," Jason said. "You just start. One step, then another. You stop trying to control the outcome and see what happens." Daniel thought about Emily in her Sarasota apartment, about Michael in the rehabilitation facility, about the wreckage he'd created with surgical precision. He thought about the 40-year-old father whose heart he'd repaired, about the children who still had their dad. He thought about the man he'd been before the affair, before the revenge, before everything fell apart. He couldn't go back to being that man. Too much had changed. But maybe he could become someone else. Someone new. "I'll call you when I land tomorrow," Daniel said. "Do that," Jason said. Daniel hung up. He paid his tab. He walked through the empty lobby to the elevators, the napkin still in his hand. In his room on the 32nd floor, he stood at the window and looked out at the city. The lake was invisible in the darkness, but he knew it was there, vast and cold and indifferent. The same lake that had been here for thousands of years. The same lake that would be here long after he was gone. He went to the bathroom and turned on the light. The mirror reflected a man he'd been avoiding for months. Gray at the temples now, lines around the eyes that hadn't been there a year ago, a face that had performed kindness while planning cruelty. Daniel stared at his reflection. He thought about the question Sarah had asked. Do you approach everything that way? Your whole life? The answer was yes. He'd always believed that control was the key. Control the variables, control the outcome. He'd controlled his career, his finances, his reputation. He'd controlled his revenge down to the smallest detail. And none of it had given him what he wanted. None of it had filled the hole Emily's betrayal had torn in him. The hole was still there, raw and open, and all the planning in the world couldn't close it. Maybe that was the lesson. Maybe some wounds couldn't be fixed with precision. Maybe some things had to heal on their own, in their own time, without a surgeon's intervention. Daniel turned off the bathroom light. He lay in the hotel bed and stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. His mind kept returning to the bar, to Sarah, to the conversation that had cracked something open inside him. She'd asked about his life outside the hospital. He'd said he didn't have one. That had been true, but it didn't have to stay true. He picked up his phone. 3 a.m, too late to text anyone. He typed a message anyway. To Sarah. Thank you for tonight. I'm not sure I deserved the conversation, but I'm grateful for it. If you're serious about the invitation, I'd like to take you up on it sometime. He stared at the message for a long moment. His thumb hovered over the send button. This wasn't part of the plan. There was no plan anymore. Just a man in a hotel room, trying to figure out what came next. He pressed send. The message went through. Read receipt appeared almost instantly. She was awake too. 3 dots appeared. She was typing. Her response came through. I'm serious. Let me know when you're free. Daniel set down the phone. Something loosened in his chest. Not forgiveness. He hadn't earned that. Not redemption. Just the faint possibility of forward motion. He closed his eyes. The last thought before sleep was a question he couldn't answer. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Was any of it worth it? The surgery, the planning, the revenge, the isolation, the empty house, the hollow victory. He didn't know. He might never know. But for the first time in 6 months, he was willing to find out. This story is a profound meditation on betrayal, revenge, and the price we pay when we choose destruction over healing. Daniel, a brilliant surgeon used to controlling every detail in the operating room, brought that same approach to the most painful moment of his life, his wife's affair with his best friend. He planned his revenge with surgical precision, calculated every move, accounted for every variable, and he won. Emily lost everything: money, reputation, social standing. Michael lost his family, his career, his freedom. From a purely logical standpoint, the plan worked flawlessly. But here's the paradox at the heart of this story. A perfect revenge left the victor hollow. Daniel got what he wanted, but not what he needed. Because no amount of payback can heal the wound of betrayal. You can destroy the life of someone who hurt you, but you can't restore broken trust. You can humiliate the person who caused you pain, but you can't undo the pain itself. Relationships between men and women exist in a space where rational control doesn't work. Daniel loved Emily for 23 years, built a life with her, trusted her completely. Emily, in turn, didn't just cheat physically. She created a parallel reality where lies were delivered with sincere smiles, where anniversary plans were discussed while she was secretly planning her next rendezvous. This double betrayal, of body and soul, cuts deeper than anything else. But Daniel, by choosing revenge, betrayed himself. He became someone he couldn't recognize in the mirror. A surgeon sworn to save lives became the architect of someone else's destruction, and when the dust settled, when his enemies were defeated, he was left alone in an empty house with an empty heart, facing a question that had no answer. Was any of it worth it? In relationships between men and women, trust isn't decoration, it's the foundation. When that foundation crumbles, you can tear the whole building down, or you can try to rebuild somewhere else. Daniel chose to demolish everything, including himself. It took months of emptiness before he began to understand that the only way forward was to let go of control and allow life to be unpredictable. His encounter with Sarah at the hotel bar wasn't a romantic twist. It was a moment of truth. For the first time in a long while, he admitted out loud, "I'm not a good person." And he received an answer that carried hope. We've all done things we regret. The question is what you do next. The moral of this story isn't that revenge is bad and forgiveness is good. The moral goes deeper. Control is an illusion. We can't control other people's feelings. We can't control their loyalty. We can't even control our own healing. All we can do is choose a direction, forward or backward. And the bravest choice is to allow yourself to move forward without knowing what lies ahead, without a plan, without controlling the outcome. Daniel hit send, and that was the beginning of something new. Not redemption, not a happy ending, just the next step. And sometimes, that's all we have. My dear viewers, I say goodbye to you until the next video. Take care of yourself and your loved ones.